So I'm going to recap day 3 and day 4 of the Julian Assange extradition hearing taking place at the Central Criminal Court in London at the Old Bailey. So the trial is on hold until Monday. I'll get to why in a second, but just to recap day 3 for you. So this is on September 9th. So immediately it starts off with expert witness testimony, right? So we had Professor Paul Rogers. He teaches at University of Bradford. He's an emeritus professor of peace. He's an expert on national security, terrorism, defense, etc. So he takes the stand and he speaks to the political nature of the trial, right? Because what the prosecution is saying is that, this extradition and the crimes that we're charging Julian Assange with, they're not political whatsoever. And as an expert witness, Professor Rogers knows what he's talking about. And so he comes, gives his testimony, and he asserts that, Julian Assange, he has very controversial views, very opposing views to the United States government, right? What he did, he essentially embarrassed the hell out of them, right? He hung their dirty laundry up in public, right? So he proved that this whole narrative that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were going well were complete nonsense. Not just that, but also the deaths of all these civilians, right? And the torture programs, the rendition, the drone strike, the killings, all of it. Just from Chelsea Manning alone, from her revelations, from what she leaked and what Julian Assange published, 15,000 extra casualties that we now know of in Iraq. That's insane. Think about that for a second. So they were covering these up, right? And Professor Rogers said that, because he's in such stark opposition to the US, of course they're after him. Of course it's political. Moreover, he's a libertarian. He said that Assange's libertarian views, and it's not just about governments, but he believes that NGOs and trade unions and corporations are all involved in this apparatus. And so, on top of that, he also said, so let me show you here in the notes, right? This was actually funny. The prosecution, Lewis QC, God, he's a nightmare. This guy, he kept asking Professor Rogers, these really intricate, complicated questions, do you think that being a journalist is having strong political convictions? Is that something inherent to being a journalist? What about an editor and a publisher? And, Rogers, he starts answering the question, and Lewis would just keep getting mad because this guy wants to corner the witnesses into a specific line of questioning. And so he only wants short answers, short yes and no answers, which is ridiculous because given these complicated questions that he's posing, you can't answer them with just yes and no, which is what he did the day before on day 2 with Mark Feldstein, right? Professor Rogers, he was able to handle this more eloquently. And so another point. So not only was he getting mad that people were actually answering his questions, but on top of it, the prosecution, they lumped all of these expert witnesses, not just Rogers. They did the same thing with Stafford Smith, with Trevor Timm, who came afterwards. They lumped them with these hundreds of pages a day before. And, they try and reference, Lewis, he would reference some document and Rogers would have difficulty finding it, which is a bit normal. You're given hundreds of pages to study in 24 hours. It's a bit hard to keep up. And so he'd get pissy about that again. It was just, absurd. And afterwards, another reason that Rogers brought up as to why this is a political witch hunt, it's a political trial. And again, the whole point of asserting that is it's forbidden under the US-UK extradition treaty of 2003. So if you can prove that it's political, of course it's political. But if you can prove it, this should spare Julian Assange from being extradited. And so another point that he brought up is that, well, look, the charges didn't change. The evidence didn't change. The only thing that has changed is the administration, right? So clearly Barack Obama didn't prosecute Julian Assange. The only thing that's changed is the administration. It's just Trump now. And so he made the point that, Trump vilifies the press on a regular basis. He called them the enemy of the people. Now, look, between you and me, if you look at what Biden and Obama did, using the very same 1917 Espionage Act to go after more journalists than any administration before them, that's not exactly press-friendly, is it? Nonetheless, Rogers was trying to ascertain that even the Obama administration, despite that, knew they would be blocked by the First Amendment. There would be hurdles. They just couldn't do this. And so the only thing that's changed is the Trump administration. And since he hates the press, well, now he's going after Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, which he deems as a threat, right? And so this is a very important point now between Obama and Trump, which we'll get back to in a second. Now we go to Lewis. So when Lewis was cross-examining Rogers, and again, he did this the day before, and he did it later in the afternoon with Timm, he kept attacking the credibility of these expert witnesses. He kept trying to prove that they were biased. And how did he do this? He said that, oh, well, look, the expert witness, in this case, Rogers, left out this statement, this assertion by AUSA Kronberg, right, who's a federal prosecutor bringing the indictment. And this statement is when Kronberg said that, oh, well, look, what we're doing here, it can't be political. We have to do this by the book, and, we're federal prosecutors, and we just do this because we do this. This is our job. We're not in it just to go after Julian Assange or something. This is just, that's a part of our job. And so it can't be political. Yeah, okay, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, just because they said that or pretend to not be undertaking a political witch hunt doesn't mean they're not actually doing it. Of course, that's what they're doing. So I found this completely ridiculous. And he tried to accuse Professor Rogers of being biased because he left that out. It's absurd. So, you left that out of your witness statement. Therefore, you're clearly biased and you're omitting this information that shows nothing but good faith on behalf of the prosecution. It's absurd. Grasping at straws, truly. So this issue with the Obama administration not pursuing the trial is very important because they made it a huge point of contention, right? And another very important thing is that the difference is when Trump got into office, you had a lot more statements, public statements from the administration that they had a very clear intent to go after Julian Assange, right? So Jeff Sessions, for example, or Mike Pompeo, they were coming out and making statements, not just that they wanted to go after WikiLeaks, but, clearly making it public and obvious that it's a vendetta. And so he said this marks a very stark contrast between the previous administration under Obama, who were, okay, they went after Chelsea Manning, but they knew their limits, so to speak. Whereas when it comes to Donald Trump, you have Trump and all of his cronies inside the administration openly saying they want to go after Julian Assange, and therefore it's political. Another very important point. So when Fitzgerald, he's from Julian Assange's defense. Remember, they take turns cross-examining the expert witnesses, right? So prosecution and defense. And here the defense are cross-examining Professor Rogers. And he referenced a very important Washington Post article from 2013. Let me show it to you. So here, take a look. So it reads here, the Justice Department has all but concluded it will not bring charges against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange for publishing classified documents because government lawyers said they could not do so without also prosecuting U.S. news organizations and journalists, according to U.S. officials. So another very important point, remember? So, again, this is also very interesting. Another thing that Rogers said is that, well, maybe, perhaps, the fact that Obama commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence on his last day in office played a role in the Trump administration's decision-making. Because, when you commute someone's sentence, it's not something that the next president or another president can typically reverse. So they were like, well, since Chelsea Manning is not in jail anymore, they did throw her back in jail, by the way, and they slapped her with like a $250,000 fine. Insanity. But nonetheless, just to make a point, just to drive it home, maybe that's why they went after Assange on top of it, to scare people out of doing national security reporting and publishing leaks. So that's an interesting point, right? So afterwards, after the lunch break, we had another expert witness, okay? Trevor Timm. So he's from the Freedom of Press Foundation, and they do really important work, really great work. And you mustn't forget, he also helped develop this secure drop system where you can essentially anonymize the uploader. And this is a point that he's going to make afterwards, is that this is used commonly now by 80 plus news organizations. So it was a system basically where if you want to submit classified documents or something important to WikiLeaks or to a news organization, you don't have to reveal your identity, keeps you anonymous, etc. And yeah, so first point that he makes, right, which is, I think, is a very important one. He says that the gathering of information isn't necessarily a passive thing, nor does it have to be. Okay, so if you remember the prosecution on the second day, we're saying that, oh, well, the difference between Assange and the New York Times, for example, is that the New York Times, they received these leaks passively. They didn't go out looking for them. Whereas Julian Assange allegedly went out and helped hack and get these files, which is ridiculous because they can't even prove that. And as Trevor Timm is asserting here, that's normal. Okay, that was the case, with the Pentagon Papers, for example. New York Times were helping Daniel Ellsberg actually copy stuff and working with him. So when you have a publisher working with the source, there's nothing out of the ordinary about that, even though the prosecution are trying to allege that it is. So Trevor Timm here blows that out of the water. He just tells him flat out, there's nothing out of the ordinary. In fact, that's very normal and that's commonplace. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a passive thing. There's nothing wrong with journalists actively seeking out classified information. And he even pointed to himself. He's tweeted, it's still up there, you can go find it, on his Twitter. He said, if anyone has these specific documents from the CIA, send them my way. So there's nothing wrong with soliciting classified information as a journalist and working with the source. All right? It's a very important point. That's if you're going to play devil's advocate and say that, oh, Julian Assange really did hack with Chelsea Manning, even though you can't prove that and it's not true. But just to play devil's advocate, even that is nothing out of the ordinary. All right. So another very important point here. So Trevor Timm said if the playbook being used against Assange were deployed back in the 70s, you would have seen Watergate reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein in jail, right? And then here we come back to the secure drop, the secure submission system. So as he says, it's neither unique nor nefarious. A plethora of other news outlets have mimicked this and use it all the time. So I think WikiLeaks were one of the first to pioneer this kind of thing. But you go to any news website, any news outlet today, they all have this. The Washington Post, New York Times, Al Jazeera, The Intercept, they all use this. So why are you just going after WikiLeaks? Because, one of the counts, one of the crimes they're trying to charge Assange with is saying that, oh, well, just by helping to protect Chelsea Manning's identity, which is a normal thing as a journalist, you help protect the source's identity if you're dealing with sensitive materials. It's a common journalistic practice, which they're trying to criminalize. Once again, do you understand the gravity of this trial? So there's nothing wrong with this secure drop system. Everyone uses this now, and it's thanks to WikiLeaks that everyone uses it. It's a good thing, and it's a common journalistic practice, but they're trying to criminalize it. So Trevor eloquently pointed that out. Moreover, yeah, so, okay, now the prosecution took over the questioning. And once again, here we go with this constant theme that we're seeing over and over. Lewis tries to discredit the expert witness. So just as he tried with Feldstein, just as he tried in the morning with Rogers, he tried to do the same thing with Trevor Timm, right? So he was like, oh, is it true that you've covered some of Julian Assange's legal costs in the past? Trevor says yes. And then Lewis asks him how much. And Trevor tells him about $100,000, right? So he essentially, what Lewis is trying to do here is show that, oh, okay, Mr. Trevor Timm has a vested interest in the outcome of this case. It's absurd. So once again, we have this theme where they're trying to discredit every expert witness that comes along. And, he flat out lost it against Timm. So right. Once again, as I mentioned here, Lewis asked Timm if he considers password cracking to be a crime, and Timm didn't allow Lewis to trip him up and said that Assange's only motive was to keep Chelsea Manning's identity safe. And honestly, if I'm being honest here, the best, most solid witness up until this point, up until now, was definitely Timm. And there was a funny moment where Lewis from the prosecution asks Trevor Timm, what makes you an authority on U.S. law? Are you a lawyer? And then he's like, yeah, I graduated in 2008. That was so hilarious. Oh God. Lewis was really it was not his day. So, not only is Timm the founder and a senior member over at the Freedom of Press Foundation, but he's also a lawyer, so he knows his shit both ways. You can't mess with him. So it's very, very tough for Lewis to get under his skin and give him this yes or no line of questioning. Didn't work. Yeah, so Lewis argues that the government have been very clear. Oh, they're not out to get journalists. They're acting purely in good faith. And Timm told him, well, that's not what the indictment says. It lists possession, solicitation, and publication of classified materials as crimes. So it is going after journalists, right? It is. Of course it is. In more ways than one. Definitely. Another very important point. Lewis asked him, are you fine with publishing people's names and endangering their lives? Because, this is something we keep hearing about, how, listen, we're not here to go after Julian Assange exposing war crimes. Oh, no, of course not. We're not covering up torture. No. We're just going after the cables that were unredacted and included the names of informants and spies, etc. And that was very bad because it endangered their lives. Yeah, well, it turns out no one had their life endangered by the WikiLeaks publication. Not a single person. And this is not WikiLeaks saying that, nor Assange, nor his defense team. It's the Pentagon. Okay? If I recall correctly, they had a whole task force deployed to this, trying to find something to nail WikiLeaks with. And they couldn't find a single person who was endangered or had harm come their way because of these leaks. So this is bogus. And remember, even though they say that they're just going after these cables, they can easily encompass the entire archive of leaks and paint Assange as having caused irreparable damage to the U.S. and whatever, fueled terrorism, etc. I explained that in the other video. So they're definitely not acting in good faith. Right, there we go. So once again, Lewis, he tries to bring up this Kronberg thing, saying, oh, you omitted it from your witness statement, therefore you're clearly biased and you're not portraying the government in a good light. Again, completely absurd. But moreover, the point being made to the court was that the US government should not have editorial say or editorial control over publications. another thing which I mentioned before is the contrast between the Obama administration and the Trump administration. So, I mean, they've both been abysmal for journalists, make no mistake. But what the prosecution are trying to argue is that, well, hold on a second. Of course, this whole trial is apolitical because Obama kept grand jury impaneled. They were ready to go. And at the same time, they weren't able to arrest Assange because he was in the embassy, in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. This is a nonsense argument. But I mean, two nonsense arguments, because first of all, the Obama administration simply did not indict Julian Assange in WikiLeaks. It just didn't. It did not happen. Okay? They went after Chelsea Manning, but they did not go after Julian Assange because even they realized that they're going to have too many hurdles when it comes to the First Amendment, right? Nonetheless, the prosecution are trying to make people believe, trying to make the court believe that Obama did go after Assange. No, he didn't. Not the same way as Trump is. It's just a fact. Moreover, this argument that, oh, well, since Julian Assange was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy, we just couldn't get to him. And so therefore, it's because of him. There was no indictment. What? Dude, do you remember this Russiagate nonsense where they charged like 6-7 Russian nationals as being hackers and having interfered in the 2016 election? Do you remember that? They're never going to arrest those people. They have no way of getting to them. But that didn't stop them from indicting them. I remember watching the whole Mueller hearing for 7 hours. God, that was atrocious. And so that's one point. Okay. Moreover, you have decades and decades of the U.S. Indicting foreign nationals that they can't exactly go after or arrest. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Obama had time to get Assange when he hadn't entered the Ecuadorian embassy yet. So if he really did want to get Assange and had any legal grounds, any actual legal basis to do so, he could have. Okay? So this doesn't hold up. They're living in some kind of fantasy. I don't know what's going on exactly. But again, they have to do these reaches when you're trying to pretend that the First Amendment doesn't exist. And, it's insane because 1 minute, the prosecution will allege that, well, Julian Assange is not a journalist, so what he did was criminal. And then the next minute, they'll say, well, Julian Assange, maybe he is a journalist, but what he did is still criminal anyway. Like, they can't make their minds up. And so that's why the prosecution spend more time trying to discredit the extra witnesses and lead them down this yes-no path of questioning than actually pointing out the flaws in every single one of their arguments. They have to go through these mental gymnastics and these reaches in order to get something out of Assange. And once again, let me reiterate. I said this on Twitter the other day. I said this in the video that I did regarding lawyers for Assange. This should, have alarm bells ringing in everybody's heads. Julian Assange is an Australian citizen in the United Kingdom. Why the hell is he being charged under US law? Once again, this makes no sense. Julian Assange is an Australian citizen, and he is in the UK. Yet somehow they are trying to charge him not under EU law, not Australian law, not UK law, no, US law. I mean, once again, Australian would have no jurisdiction regardless. But do you see the issue here with the extraterritorialization? And, Glenn responded to my tweet and made a brilliant point. You always hear this, oh, Julian Assange is a traitor. Julian Assange betrayed the US. What? He's not American. He doesn't owe you shit. He's been to the US once, I think, for a few days. I don't know what it was, maybe on holiday or something, but he didn't commit any crime. And this stuff that he's being charged with, these 18 counts, cyber crimes, espionage, the whole list, was definitely not done in the US, if it was done. So what the hell is going on here? This is how far the arm of Uncle Sam reaches. Oh yeah. That's why it should concern everybody, man. Everybody. They're applying US law to an Australian in the United Kingdom. What? Another great point that Glenn made was that could you imagine if people from the New York Times or The Intercept were suddenly arrested and taken to be held, to be tried in Iran, for example, or any foreign country for publishing classified documents. You know, we talked about Nishan, for example, right? The Lebanese political commentator and journalist. Dude, he didn't even publish anything classified. He just insulted Erdogan, right? Remember, Nishan is also Armenian, so his ancestors were killed in the genocide. And so the Turkish government filed a complaint, and now he has a court date in Lebanon because of comments he made about the Turkish president. I mean, this is insane. This extraterritorialization. This should scare you. This should scare journalists especially, because that means even if you're in another country and you haven't even committed a crime. I mean, remember, Julian Assange is a journalist, so regardless where he is, he hasn't actually committed a crime. But moreover, the fact that he's not American, he's not in America, and he's still being tried under U.S. law, what? No. This is dystopian. So nonetheless, I wanted to bring you up to date on day 3. So that was September 9th. And then what happened on day 4? So yesterday, September 10th. The court starts at 10 a.m., if I recall correctly, and then the prosecution doesn't show up. There's no prosecution. Turns out the husband of one of the lawyers on the prosecution team was exhibiting symptoms of COVID. So they started a case management hearing to decide what's going to happen. You know, are they going to postpone it? Are they going to do it remotely? What's going on? And, you know, Lewis is on with his laptop from the hotel, and he's like, oh, I forgot my laptop charger in the courthouse, and I have 30 minutes left on my laptop. What? I mean, it's not very professional, to say the least, you know. But regardless, the judge decided to postpone the extradition hearing until Monday, right? Until everybody gets tested and make sure that no one actually has it. Now, I have 2 questions here. Listen, why didn't they get tested beforehand? You don't think that that's the smart thing to do? I mean, this extradition hearing was taking place in February, and the only reason it was put on hold until now was because of COVID. So you don't think the sensible thing to do would be to test everyone for COVID? Moreover, if it's not safe for the prosecution, and it's not safe for the clerks, and it's not safe for the judge, and it's not safe for the defense team, why is it safe for Julian Assange? Remember, he has underlying health issues. He has breathing problems. Man, he's been tortured physically and psychologically, being holed up for 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy, and now in solitary in Belmarsh. He gets like 1 hour, 2 hours out of his cell, not even, just inhumane. And this guy is at much higher risk with COVID than anyone else because of his breathing problems. And you've already had one inmate that died at Belmarsh prison because of this. So he's at risk already as it is in Belmarsh. And now they cart him off to the Old Bailey. And the prosecution maybe have brought this into the goddamn criminal court. Man, come on. Again, do you see how much disdain and how little they respect this man's life? It's really an abomination what they're doing to Julian. It really is. Once again, don't forget, man, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture visited Julian in Belmarsh with 2 physicians, and Their conclusion was this man has been tortured. He's being tortured physically, psychologically, and they demand his immediate release. There's broad consensus on this issue from those who are speaking up. This is wrong legally speaking. It's wrong ethically. It's an attack on journalistic freedoms. And this poor man's health is at stake, moreover. Not just his freedom, his health, literally. They're bastards, man. So, day 4, nothing happened. That was it. It was, over in an hour when they had this case management hearing, and then that was it. So, I just wanted to bring you up to speed on that. So, you have an idea of what's happening, and yeah, we'll see on Monday. So once again, Kevin Gotzola, he's doing great work on Twitter. There's a bunch of journalists. We're not many, but there are a few of us that are live tweeting. And if you'd like to have live coverage of that as the trial is unfolding, then definitely follow on Twitter. So you'll find me over here at RichardMedhurst. 10 a.m. on Monday. There you go.